Okay, so why don't we move quickly into Marc Hershman's presentation. Marc is a practicing architect in the city of Newton. He was originally appointed by City Warren for the first iteration of the zoning reform task force, and he continues to be actively involved with zoning reform here in Newton.
We've been looking at village centers. It's an important issue here in Newton and most communities. And what we've done is take a architectural and analytical look and visual look at village centers and try to figure out what's good and what can work. And so we'll jump right in. As a practicing architect, just briefly, I studied architecture at Cornell and then came to this area at the Graduate School of Design at Harvard to study urban design. A little bit about my background also is I grew up in Brooklyn and I grew up in an apartment building. So those are the key things that underpin my interest in this, and of course helping out the city and being interested in housing. And right now I'm involved in a range of projects, and let's get on and visit village centers. So let's look at some that are near us. Wellesley Center, and it's a visual walkthrough. What do we find attractive? What we find is one-story buildings predominantly, and we do find some two-story. What's interesting, if you could see my cursor, is also the buildings have character and not just have a particular height, but a particular length that break up the streetscape. So let's look at more. So we go to Florida. Let's get warm this time of year. Delray, Florida. This is very interesting because this too is low scale, extremely active. It's a destination point. It has a big draw July 4th. And what's fascinating is this was a depressed area. And the community chose to rehabilitate the community in this area. So they didn't build big buildings, tall buildings. They rehabilitated the structures that was there. It was profitable for builders, and it was profitable for tenants and enjoyed by the community. Okay. Santa Barbara. Let's go across the country. Similarly, 1- and 2-story buildings. And of course, an amazing destination and attracts people locally and from near and far. Now, as we look down in Santa Barbara, though, we see a building in the distance, and we get a little closer. Wow, look what it does. It truly eclipses the whole streetscape. We get even closer. It is an 8-story building, but here you could see when you're closer to it, you could count the stories that you visually see, and it's 6. Even though it's 8, it feels like a 6-story building, and still it incredibly eclipses the streetscape. And by being a big building, it minimizes the main event of retail on the first, because you perceive a full building as opposed to the rest of the streetscape, which is single-story or 2-story retail. So we continue. Brooklyn, New York. If you consider Brooklyn, it would be the fourth largest city in the country. This is a very big intersection in Brooklyn, Kings Highway and Coney Island Avenue. And what do we have? 2-story buildings. And it works. It worked then, it works now for both proprietors, real estate owners, and the community. They didn't need and do not need to go any further than this in this community. And what's interesting is they activate not just the first floor, but second floor you could see is also activated as retail, sometimes as office. And of course, there are places in communities that it is residential. but they're able to have the modesty and sense of scale, human scale, to keep with 2 stories. Continue on. Waltham. We're a very, very active village center, a big draw, lots of restaurants. It's like Restaurant Row, and they also have other retail. And you can see predominantly 1-story buildings, and very effective and very inviting. We look at the other end of Waltham. There are 2-story buildings. And yes, look beyond, we do find an area of 4 stories. But when we get to the 4-story area, we're not just experiencing retail. We're experiencing buildings, which in a way diminishes the interest, the focus on the main event, which is the retail. Fortunately, it's just kept within this area, but it is a totally different feel than the rest of the street. And then we go a little further, Cronin's Landing, also at the end of Moody Street. And what do we see when we look at Cronin's Landing? One, it's tall, and you would think, oh, does this have retail? And you think, well, yeah, perhaps the intent is retail, but it is not as inviting. It is not as active along here as it is on the other part of Moody Street. What we also experience is the length of the building, as we looked at in Wellesley, compartmentalizing the street. Having individual character along the streetscape is incredibly important. So now let's look at Newton. Woburn. We should maybe dwell on this one the rest of the time, but there are more slides. Not just 1 story, but they also have character. Also similar to the idea that we were looking at in Wellesley, where the buildings are compartmentalized. There are different events, different lengths of the building along the streetscape. There's a variety of look and feel along the village center. We look at Newton Highlands. Here, they're a little taller. We have 2, and in certain cases, 3 stories. You see further down, it gets a little more congested. And then we look at here the 3 stories, maybe not so bad. Why? Because we actually have a plaza in front of it. That's a big difference. So the proportion for human scale is related to the amount of breathing space around as well. And here, where it's more in the streetscape, even though it has a 3rd floor, it is saying, I really want to be a 2-story building with the streetscape primarily focusing you, the person, to experience the village center, to partake in the retail ground floor experience. Newtonville, again, 1 story, some 2 are aspiring 2-story buildings, but we have something again in the distance. Wow, when we get a little closer, the Masonic Building, a beautiful building if you go inside, but it is totally out of scale for this village center. They must have been restricted by where they purchased a piece of property. This building would be great if it had a plaza around it. But in this situation, you could see how it is so incongruous to the look and feel of a village center. Here we go to Newtonville. Again, we have 1 and 2-story retail in the area. And look, we have something new. We have Trio across the street. And wow, this is quite a big building. Reminds us of Cronin's Landing. And similar to Cronin's Landing, this does not speak retail. These are small apertures in more of a solid surface. But even if it had more glazing, we experience, and our eye goes to the whole complex, and the feeling of retail is not as prominent as in the streetscape of the 1 and 2 story village centers we have seen in earlier images. Let's look back what was there before, the Orr building. We had a very popular restaurant on the ground floor, and we had presumably some either office or residential over time. And, you might say, it's up to us as the public to decide what we really want going forward. Newton Center, 1 story. Other areas of Newton Center along Union Street, again, 1 story retail. You want to experience retail. You are not distracted by anything else. You're not going to get huge shadow lines from other floors above. That's what the purposes of the village center is, to have you partake in an active public experience. And yes, look further along Union Street, we do have a two story, and it still predominantly focuses on the retail. And wow, you look a little closer, there's even an upper story above the 2nd story, but similar to on Lincoln Street, they were wise enough to tuck it back under a roof as another potential upper floor. So here we are, Framingham. Let's look at Framingham. Now this is what we have when we have full 3-story buildings each side. Dense is a word for it. It feels tight. And what's interesting is you think, well, maybe it's not so bad, but we have to recognize that this is along a much bigger thoroughfare. This is a bigger urban city, or had been, earlier in its development, a bigger urban center. So here you have 4 lanes of traffic when we really, in our village centers, have 2. So if we visualize this coming in 2 lanes, that would be quite severe. And look here, a little further down, here in Framingham, is a newer building. And wow, this would be a cousin of Trio. And this is really where we're going if we choose to have more projects of this scope and scale and look and feel. So that's the bulk of the initial part of it. I want to go briefly about human scale, some of the metrics. And the metrics are a length and width of what urban designers, architects, and landscape people have found over time what to be appealing. And there was a time during the 50s and 60s where some felt maybe a 1-to-1 ratio of height to width would be okay. That was during the period of urban redevelopment. So that fell out of favor, as we know. And now currently, most designers lean towards a 1-to-2 or 1-to-3, and even as much as a 1-to-6 ratio. So the desire is more space as opposed to higher density. So we move on to the examples of, we have certain widths of, like in Newtonville, 62 feet wide. Our ratio of our 1- and 2-story buildings are 1-to-4 or 1-to-2.5. So 2-story buildings fit in quite well under that metric. Lincoln Street is tighter, it's 40 feet wide. one-story buildings falls within the 2 and 3 metric between a one to height and 2 to 3 width, and two stories just about fits there. 3 stories would be closer to a much tighter metric, but we recognize if we have more breathing room, that is possible in a plaza area. So that is some of the metrics. What I would like to share briefly is some other images going in briefly, and that's just looking at a few other places in the middle of the country. Here's Broadway in Bedford, Ohio. And again, here's a very, very nice 2-story streetscape where there are different lengths and particular variations of buildings along the streetscape. So they're not lengthy buildings as we see in Trio and Cronin's Landing. And we'll go through a few others. Kingston, New York. Again, we have here's 2-story buildings, here 3 stories. And I'm showing these additional ones to give you a look and feel of what some other places will look like where you do have 2 and more 3-story. And again, when you have the 3 and maybe even 4-story, it feels more hemmed in and not as appealing as the 2-story event. Telluride, Colorado, 2-story, and again, you compartmentalize, you have variety of ownership and properties along the streetscape. Franklin, Tennessee. So, and let's go abroad. Now we're looking at some newer developments. So not that Europe's always ahead of us. There are some interesting village centers that are being developed in abroad, and it's worth looking at. And what are they choosing to do? 1 and 2-story retail village centers. This is London. Again, London. And even with the plaza, they don't take advantage of saying, well, I could go higher. Ireland. Similarly, 1-story, 2-story, a sense of proportion where you focus on the event. You want to participate in the retail experience. Why don't we go really abroad and take a quick look at Shanghai, China? Only, depending who's counting, the second, I believe it is the 3rd largest city in the whole world. Tokyo being the first, Delhi maybe the second. The important thing is this is high density living, Shanghai, and this is the traditional retail areas in Shanghai. And we can see what they have. They're 2 stories. You have the retail and you have something above. And they thrive with this, and you can see what's beyond. And here we go. Here you see, this is what's built, but this is the traditional streetscape in the old part, of Shanghai, which is mixed in, obviously very close to all the new. And to just give a little due, that was, you might say, that was historic. Maybe there's preservation and some reasoning, but obviously they hold that dear to them. Obviously they do. And here in Shanghai, here's a new village center. Let's take a look at it. It's 1 and 2 stories. And here we have a view of Shanghai. And this should really teach us a lot. This is worth looking for a long time, but we can't dwell on each slide too long. But this gives you a feel about Shanghai, the 2nd or 3rd largest city in the world. Yes, they're building the high rises, But you know what? There's still the homes. There are still homes that people traditionally still live in and desire to live in. The reality, if you look at what's going on in China right now, even though there's been the drives similar to the Soviet Union of bringing the masses to the cities, there is a movement back to the countryside. There is a large movement of people saying, we want a little place of our own and to have a little home in and a piece of land in China. And China is a big, big land mass, and there is the room, and they are doing it. So here you see the mix, the variety of Shanghai. So in conclusion, let's take a look at what this stuff, what's going on and where does it come from. The concept of the slab building comes from Le Corbusier's concepts for his plan for Paris, for a city of 3 million. And the towers in the park and this whole concept of the high density, high rises and slab buildings in a park has been debunked. We know that there have been high rises, Pruitt-Igoe, that have been demolished because the paradigm is not conducive for human scale and human habitation. Here on the right is, I was surprised to see, is a proposal for Suffolk Downs. And if you look at it, look at these pieces. These horseshoe pieces are not very different from the slab buildings that Le Corbusier was proposing for a city of 3 million to actually level Paris, all its traditional buildings, and to build this. And Le Corbusier spent a long time trying to sell this concept in the States and different areas. And in the outskirts of Paris, they built slab buildings and tall buildings, but it's not the high desired places. And Le Corbusier himself, during the post-revolution in the Soviet Union, he tried to sell some of these concepts over there, and they didn't really choose to take him up on doing a city plan for them either. So if we just look about what's going on, how does this relate to us? This is a little site plan of Dunstan East. This is just a small example of these pieces that we see in Suffolk Downs. And what is so fascinating that we have to see it, it speaks volumes to us. This is what New England is. These are the houses, the single families, the two families, the triple deckers. This is the scale of our community. This is New England. And this is what is being proposed to butt up against our New England, our cherished New England. And here's a small example, and there are going to be more examples of this, which really is this when you see it done in a little bit more, more predominantly. So this should give us pause. There's a modesty. We know what we like. We know what is attractive. Here's views. This is a view of the Suffolk Downs project. And here's a view of Dunstan East. And there's an elevation of Dunstan East. And it's our choice to say, do we want more, or do we have a modesty of really building and maintaining our communities in a human scale as places like Delray chose to do? So that's, in conclusion, I open it to any discussion, and it's a pleasure sharing with you.